The conference room felt colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was the October rain drumming against the windows of Vertex Digital's San Francisco headquarters. Or maybe it was the ice in CEO Richard Bennett's eyes as he delivered the news I'd been expecting for months. "Madison, you've done amazing work as CTO," he said, his rehearsed speech barely masking his impatience. "But technology moves fast. We need fresh perspectives." I kept my face carefully neutral, watching the board members avoid my gaze. 8 years I'd spent building Vertex's cloud platform from a basic hosting service into a $2 billion enterprise solution. 8 years of missed holidays, endless debugging sessions, and 3 AM crisis calls. "Fresh perspectives," I repeated softly. "Like your son's." Richard straightened, his expensive suit crinkling slightly. "Brandon has an MBA from Stanford. He understands modern business dynamics. What Brandon didn't have was a single day of coding experience or any real-world tech leadership. But he did have something I never would: the right last name." "The transition will be immediate," Richard continued. "Brandon's already prepared a new technical roadmap. More aggressive growth, faster deployment cycles." I thought about the platform's architecture, the complex systems I carefully built and refined over years. The redundancies, the fail-safes, the careful balance between innovation and stability. All the things Brandon couldn't possibly understand from his MBA case studies. "Of course," I said calmly. "I assume you'd like me to brief Brandon on the current system architecture." Richard waved dismissively. "He's got his own vision. Clean slate approach. Though we would appreciate you signing this." He slid a document across the table. "Standard non-compete, enhanced confidentiality provisions. Generous severance, of course." I picked up the agreement, scanning its terms while thinking about the other document, the one hidden in my private safe at home. Patent application number 2021-857, filed 18 months ago under my own name, not the company's. "What about the clients?" I asked. "Some of them are quite particular about technical oversight." "Brandon's already scheduled meetings with all major accounts," Richard said proudly. "Fresh energy, new relationships. They'll understand." I thought about James Martinez at Goldman Tech, who'd once spent 3 hours discussing quantum computing theories with me over coffee. About Sarah Chin from Microsoft Azure, who regularly texted me about system optimization ideas at midnight. About all the relationships built not on titles or degrees, but on shared understanding of technology's complexities. "When do you need the agreement signed?" "Today, ideally. Brandon starts Monday." I nodded, tucking the document into my bag without signing it. "I'll review it with my lawyer." "Madison," Richard's voice hardened slightly. "This is a generous offer. It would be unwise to make things difficult." I stood smoothing my skirt. "I never make things difficult, Richard. I just make them work." Outside the conference room, my team was trying to look busy while obviously waiting for news. Brilliant engineers and developers I personally recruited, trained, and mentored. "All hands meeting in 10 minutes, I announced. Important updates." While they filed into the large meeting room, I ducked into my office, soon to be Brandon's office, and opened my laptop. A message was waiting from Diana Foster, my former colleague who'd left Vertex 2 years ago to start her own tech company. "Is it time?" I typed back a single word: "Yes." The response came instantly: "Everything's ready. Just say when." I closed my laptop and headed to the meeting room. My team deserved to hear it from me first. As of today, I began, looking at their familiar faces, I'm stepping down as CTO. Brandon Bennett will be taking over on Monday. The shock in the room was palpable. Emily, our lead backend developer, actually gasped. "Brandon Bennett?" Jake from security asked. "The CEO's son. The one who asked if we could just download more RAM." A few people snickered, then quickly sobered. "This is a board decision," I continued. "Brandon has his own vision for the platform's future. I trust you'll all give him the same dedication and professionalism you've shown me." "But the Watson migration," Emily protested. "The new security protocols, the quantum encryption project. He doesn't know anything about." I held up a hand. "Brandon has an MBA from Stanford. I'm sure he'll figure it out." The sarcasm wasn't lost on them. Neither was the slight smile playing at the corners of my mouth, the one that told them there was more to this story. After the meeting, Emily lingered behind. This isn't right, she said quietly. The platform is your life's work. Is it? I opened my phone, showing her a private GitHub repository. Her eyes widened as she scanned the code. Is that a completely new platform, built from the ground up? Better architecture, cleaner code, true quantum-resistant encryption. I closed the phone. But you didn't see that. She smiled slowly. No, I didn't. Just like I haven't seen the resumes I've been quietly sending out, or the calls I've been getting from a certain new tech startup. Good. I handed her a business card, Diana Foster's business card. You definitely shouldn't call that number next week. Word spread quickly through the tech community. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from clients, colleagues, and competitors. I answered none of them. Instead, I spent the evening in my home office, reviewing the platform I'd been secretly building for the past 18 months. Not on Vertex's servers or with their resources, I was too careful for that. This was my own creation, developed in parallel while maintaining their system. Every time Richard had dismissed my suggestions for improvement, every time the board had cut my department's budget, I'd added those rejected features to my private project. Now it was ready. A cloud platform that made Vertex look like a student project. And thanks to my carefully worded employment contract, which I'd insisted on 8 years ago, I owned it completely. My phone buzzed again. A message from James at Goldman Tech. Heard the news. Brandon just tried to schedule a meeting. Told him I'm busy for the next month. Call me? I smiled but didn't respond. Not yet. Another buzz. Sarah from Microsoft. Please tell me you're not really retiring. The industry needs you. I opened my laptop instead, checking the status of certain key elements. Diana's company, Foster Technologies, had spent months preparing for this moment. Infrastructure was in place. Data centers were ready. A carefully selected team, many of them former Vertex employees who'd left over the past 2 years, was standing by. One final message came through from Richard himself. Madison, legal needs that agreement signed first thing tomorrow. I closed my phone without replying and walked to my window, looking out over the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere out there, Brandon Bennett was probably celebrating his new role, planning all the changes he'd make to my platform. Let him celebrate. In 2 weeks, when Vertex's system faced its quarterly peak load test, he'd learn the hard way that complex technology couldn't be managed through PowerPoint slides and MBA frameworks. And by then, I'd be ready with something better. My phone buzzed one last time. Diana again, teams in place. Infrastructure's ready. Clients are already asking questions. Just say the word. I thought about Richard's dismissive wave, about Brandon's smug smile, about all the times I'd been told to be patient, to wait my turn, to accept decisions made by people who couldn't code their way out of a text editor. 2 weeks, I typed back. When their system fails its load test, we launch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's building something so much better that the competition becomes irrelevant. And I'd had 18 months to build something perfect. The first warning signs appeared exactly 13 days after Brandon took over. I was in Foster Technologies' new offices reviewing deployment schedules with Diana, when my phone lit up with a message from Emily. He's breaking everything, she wrote. Brandon just pushed a streamlined version of the load balancing system. Says the old architecture was unnecessarily complex. I showed the message to Diana, who winced. Doesn't he realize that tomorrow's load tests? Nope. I leaned back in my chair. He probably thinks it's just routine maintenance. Something to check off his MBA to-do list. Another message from Emily. He disabled 3 backup systems. Called them redundant and inefficient. I thought about the careful architecture I'd built over 8 years. The fail-safes and redundancies that had kept Vertex's platform running through earthquakes, power outages, and cyber attacks. All of it now in the hands of someone who thought cloud computing was about actual clouds. How many clients have signed preliminary agreements with us? I asked Diana. She pulled up a spreadsheet. 23 so far, including Goldman Tech and Microsoft Azure. All pending our platform launch, of course. They're just waiting for tomorrow. I finished. They're waiting for tomorrow. The quarterly load test wasn't just routine maintenance. It was when Vertex's system handled peak traffic from all clients simultaneously, processing billions of transactions to ensure stability. I designed the test myself, built the infrastructure to handle it, added layer upon layer of protection against failure. Protection Brandon had just removed. My phone buzzed again. James from Goldman Tech. Brandon just gave us a presentation about his vision. Try to explain cloud architecture to our engineering team. It was something. I smiled but didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked our system one final time. The platform I built in secret was ready, running on Foster's infrastructure, tested and retested until it was perfect. Status report from all teams? I asked Diana. She pressed a button on her desk phone. All departments, go/no-go for tomorrow's launch. The responses came in quickly. Infrastructure team ready, security protocols verified, client migration tools standing by, support team fully staffed. We had spent months preparing for this moment. Many of our employees were former Vertex team members who quietly joined us over the past year. They knew both systems intimately, and more importantly, they knew which one was better. At 5:47 p.m., another message from Emily. Brandon just left for the day. Said the load test is basically automatic, and he has dinner plans. I checked the time. The test would begin automatically at midnight, gradually ramping up system load until it peaked at 9 a.m. Brandon probably thought he could handle any issues from home. He was wrong. Diana and I stayed in the office, watching the hours tick by. At 11:30 p.m., our monitoring systems showed increased activity on Vertex's network as the pre-test diagnostics began. At 11:45 p.m., Emily reported the first warning signs. Temperature rising in primary data center. Brandon's streamlined cooling systems aren't keeping up. At 11:55 p.m., Jake from security messaged, multiple failsafe systems trying to reactivate. Brandon's override is blocking them. At exactly midnight, it began. The first wave of test transactions hit Vertex's servers. Under normal circumstances, the load would have been automatically distributed across multiple data centers, carefully balanced to prevent overload. But Brandon had simplified that system. Within minutes, warning alerts started flooding in. Server temperatures critical. Backup systems offline. Load balancers failing. He's not responding to emergency alerts, Emily reported. His phone's going straight to voicemail. I watched through our monitoring tools as Vertex's platform began to buckle, critical systems failing one by one, each failure cascading into others, the carefully orchestrated dance of data and processing collapsing into chaos. At 12:17 a.m., the first major client connections dropped. At 12:22 a.m., the primary data center went into emergency shutdown. At 12:25 a.m., Vertex's entire cloud platform crashed. My phone exploded with messages. James from Goldman Tech. Complete system failure. Need immediate alternative. Sarah from Microsoft. Platforms down. Tell me you have something ready. Various other clients, all asking the same thing. What's your backup plan? I turned to Diana and nodded once. She pressed a button on her phone. All teams, execute launch protocol alpha. Within minutes, our sales team began reaching out to affected clients. Not with pitches or promises, but with immediate solutions, emergency access credentials, migration protocols, direct connections to our fully tested, fully operational platform. First client connecting now, our systems team reported. Goldman Tech initiating emergency transfer. We watched as their data began flowing into our system, smooth and secure, everything working exactly as designed. By 1 a.m., 12 major clients had initiated transfers to our platform. By 2 a.m., that number had doubled. By 3 a.m., Vertex's biggest clients were running smoothly on our system while their own platform remained dark. Brandon finally surfaced at 4:13 a.m., his panic evident in a company-wide email. Experiencing temporary technical difficulties. Working to restore service. But it was too late. Their clients weren't interested in waiting for a rookie CEO's son to figure out what he'd broken. They needed stability, security, and expertise. They needed what I'd spent 18 months building. At 6 a.m., Richard Bennett himself called me. I let it go to voicemail. At 7 a.m., the board chair tried. Then the lead investor. Then their legal team. I sat in Foster's offices, watching the sunrise over San Francisco, as our client list grew by the minute. Emily had officially joined us at 5 a.m., bringing 4 key developers with her. More were following. Madison. Diana called from her desk. Vertex's stock is falling. They're down 30% in pre-market trading. I nodded, unsurprised. What's our status? 28 major clients fully migrated. 12 more in progress. System performing at optimal levels despite the load. She paused. They're finished, aren't they? Not yet, I said, opening my email. But soon. I had one message to send, a carefully worded announcement to the tech community. Foster Technologies announces immediate availability of next-generation cloud platform, featuring quantum-resistant encryption and true adaptive scaling. Platform designed by former Vertex Digital CTO Madison Chen and team. The response was immediate. Industry news sites picked up the story within minutes. Vertex's stock fell another 15%. At 8:47 a.m., Richard Bennett finally swallowed his pride and sent an email. Whatever you want. Name your price. Just help us fix this. I showed the email to Diana, who laughed. Are you going to respond? Not yet. I stood stretching after the long night. First, I think Brandon needs to learn a valuable lesson about respecting other people's work. Our platform hummed smoothly in the background, handling the load that had crashed Vertex's system. Every line of code, every system design, every architectural decision validated by real-world performance. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Emily. Brandon just threw his Stanford diploma at the wall. Literally shattered the frame. I smiled, thinking about all the times I'd been told to step aside for fresh perspectives and new energy, about all the complex systems I built that had been dismissed as unnecessarily complicated. Madison, Diana called out. Vertex's board is calling an emergency meeting. Apparently, Brandon's position is being reevaluated. I nodded, unsurprised. How's our system performing? Perfectly. Every metric exceeding expectations. The clients are amazed. Good. I sat down at my desk, my real desk in my real office at my real company. Then let's show them what actual innovation looks like. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching your competitors fail. It's showing them exactly what they lost when they push you away. 3 months after Vertex's catastrophic system failure, I stood on stage at the annual Tech Innovation Summit in San Francisco. The audience was packed with industry leaders, investors, and engineers, including, I noticed, several Vertex board members seated uncomfortably in the back row. Innovation isn't about buzzwords or degrees, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed auditorium. It's about understanding complexity, about respecting the delicate balance between advancement and stability, about knowing that in technology there are no shortcuts. In the front row, Diana smiled. Foster Technologies had just crossed $1 billion in valuation, our client list reading like a who's who of global tech. Every major company that had witnessed Vertex's collapse firsthand had switched to our platform. Brandon, I'd heard, had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. His LinkedIn now listed him as a strategic consultant, though the industry grapevine suggested he wasn't getting many calls. When I left Vertex Digital, I continued, many assumed I was finished, that I'd fade away like so many other displaced technologists. What they didn't realize was that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. The screens behind me lit up with real-time metrics from our platform. Processing speeds, security protocols, client satisfaction rates, all setting new industry standards. They thought complex systems could be simplified with PowerPoint slides and MBA frameworks. They thought 8 years of architectural knowledge could be replaced with fresh energy. They were wrong. In the 3 months since our launch, Foster Technologies had revolutionized cloud computing. Our quantum-resistant encryption had become the new standard. Our adaptive scaling technology had made traditional load balancing obsolete. We weren't just better than Vertex. We were better than anything else on the market. After my keynote, James from Goldman Tech caught up with me in the lobby. You know, he said, grinning, Brandon tried to pitch us last week. Some new venture he's starting. Something about disruptive paradigms and synergistic cloud solutions. I raised an eyebrow. How did that go? Let's just say our engineering team still quotes his RAM downloading suggestion in meetings. As we chatted, I noticed Richard Bennett himself hovering nearby, clearly working up the courage to approach. He looked older now, his confident swagger replaced by something more hesitant. Madison, he finally said, stepping forward. Do you have a moment? I excused myself from James and turned to face my former CEO. Of course, Richard. How's the recovery going? He flinched slightly. Vertex's stock had stabilized, but at 70% below its previous value. Their remaining clients were bound by contracts that would soon expire. That's actually what I wanted to discuss, he said quietly. The board, we've been talking. About the future. About leadership. I waited, already knowing what was coming. We'd like you to come back, he continued. Full control. CEO position. Whatever terms you want. 3 months ago, this offer might have been tempting. The chance to reclaim my old platform, to prove I should have been in charge all along. But now, I'm afraid that's not possible, Richard. I gestured around at the conference, at the Foster Technologies logos prominently displayed. I'm building something better. We could acquire Foster, he pressed. A merger. Keep the brand, the technology. Whatever you want. I smiled, thinking about the message it would send. About every talented engineer passed over for promotion because they didn't have the right pedigree or play the right politics. No, I said firmly. Some things need to fail, Richard, so others can learn from their mistakes. Later that evening, at Foster's headquarters, I held an all-hands meeting. Our team had grown to over 200 people, many of them former Vertex employees who joined us after the collapse. Today marks a milestone, I announced. We've just signed our 100th major client. Our platform is processing more transactions daily than Vertex handled in their best month. But more importantly, we've proven something crucial. Emily, now our Chief Architecture Officer, beamed from her seat in the front row. Jake had taken over global security operations. Every person who believed in me, who'd seen the potential I was building in secret, had been rewarded with positions that matched their talents, not their titles. We've proven that real innovation comes from understanding complexity, not oversimplifying it. That experience matters more than expectations. That's sometimes the best response to being underestimated, is to build something so superior that the competition becomes irrelevant. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't finished, which is why I'm pleased to announce our new initiative, the Foster Innovation Fund. We're allocating $100 million to invest in overlooked technologists, people with brilliant ideas but without the right background or connections. People who understand that real progress comes from expertise, not entertainment. Diana joined me on stage, holding up the first batch of investment agreements. 20 brilliant engineers and developers, all rejected by traditional tech companies for being too technical, not polished enough, not fitting the expected mold. Because that's how we change this industry, I continued. Not by playing their game, but by creating a better one. My phone buzzed, a news alert. Vertex had just announced another round of layoffs. Their platform, hastily patched back together after Brandon's departure, was losing clients weekly. The board was considering selling what was left of the company. But I barely glanced at it. I was too busy looking at the faces in our office, at the real innovation happening on our screens, at the future we were building. That evening, as I worked late in my office, Emily stopped by. Just got another call from Vertex's HR, she said, settling into a chair. They're really desperate to rebuild their technical team. I looked up from my screens. What did you tell them? That I'm exactly where I need to be, she paused. You know, when Brandon first took over, I was angry. Couldn't understand how they could be so blind. But now I realize they did us all a favor. Forced us to build something better. Something real. I nodded, thinking about the long nights coding in secret, the careful planning, the quiet confidence of knowing I was building something revolutionary. Madison, Emily continued, there's a rumor that Microsoft is considering standardizing their entire cloud infrastructure on our platform. Is it true? I smiled, remembering Sarah's call earlier that day. Let's just say next quarter's numbers will be interesting. After Emily left, I walked to the window of our offices, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably working on his next PowerPoint presentation. Richard was likely meeting with crisis managers. The Vertex board was presumably strategizing about survival. But here, in our building, real innovation was happening. Real technology was being built. Real progress was being made. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Diana. You should see the latest applicants for the Innovation Fund. These kids make us look old. I smiled, thinking about the future we were shaping. Not just a better platform, but a better industry, one where talent mattered more than titles, where complexity was respected, where real innovation could flourish. Send me their files, I typed back. Time to build something even better. Because that's the thing about technology and about revenge. The best kind doesn't just prove them wrong. It makes their mistakes irrelevant. And we were just getting started. The leather chair squeaked as James Harrison leaned back, examining me like I was an inconvenient typo in his morning reports. His new nameplate gleamed on the desk. Director of Global Operations, Maxwell Industries, the position I'd been unofficially doing for the past 3 years. Look, Olivia, he said, dragging out my name like it was something distasteful. The fact is, your role here has become redundant. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, face neutral. Behind him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what used to be my office, London's financial district sparkled in the morning sun. The same view I'd looked at every day while building Maxwell's international client portfolio from 2 accounts to 27. Redundant? I repeated softly. He smiled, the kind of smile that never touches the eyes. Let's be honest. You were David's secretary who got lucky. He let you handle some client interactions, make some decisions. Very progressive of him. But now that he's retired, I'm the senior account manager for our top 5 clients, I corrected, including Rothschild Global. Harrison waved his hand dismissively. Titles are just titles. The reality is, we need someone with real executive experience. Someone who understands global operations at a fundamental level. Someone like you. I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Exactly? He didn't even catch the sarcasm. I've spent 15 years in operations, MBA from Harvard. Summer home in the Hamptons. I know how to talk to these people. These people, like the CFO of Rothschild Global, wasn't the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. Like the CEO of Zhang Technologies, didn't prefer meeting in hole-in-the-wall dumpling shops instead of fancy restaurants. Our clients have specific expectations. I tried one last time. Relationships built over years. Oh, don't worry about that, Harrison cut in. I've already scheduled meetings with all the major accounts. Once they see the new direction we're taking, they'll understand. Business is business, after all. I thought about the weekly calls I had with Sarah Adenuga at Rothschild. About our shared love of true crime podcasts and the recipes we exchanged. About how I'd attended her daughter's graduation last month. When? I asked simply. Effective immediately. He slid a folder across the desk. HR has prepared a generous severance package. 2 months' salary, standard NDA, letter of recommendation. Though between us, he winked, with your limited qualifications, you might want to look at smaller firms. Or maybe go back to being a regular secretary. The words hit like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I thought about the email I'd received last night from Michael Zhang, confirming our private dinner next week to discuss expanding their contract to $50 million annually. The dinner Harrison didn't know about. I'll need to inform the clients, I said. No need. We'll handle all communications. Clean break, you understand. In fact, he glanced at his watch. Security is waiting to escort you out. Standard procedure. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt. Of course. Though you might want to review the client communication protocols. He frowned. The what? The individual communication preferences each client has specified in their contract. They're quite particular about how they receive updates and who they'll speak with. Harrison's frown deepened. That's hardly necessary. I'll just have my assistant. Your choice, I shrugged, picking up my bag. Though you might want to check Section 7.3 of the Rothschild Agreement, the part about designated points of contact. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. I'm sure it's all standard boilerplate. I smiled, remembering the clause I personally negotiated with Rothschild's legal team last year. The one that specified all strategic communications had to go through their designated account manager. Me. Good luck, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Security was waiting outside, 2 guards looking distinctly uncomfortable. They'd worked with me for years, see me stay late, arrive early, build something from nothing. Sorry about this, Ms. Walker, Jim, the senior guard, muttered. It's fine, I assured him. Just doing your job. As we walked to my desk, people peeked over cubicle walls and around corners. The news had spread fast. I kept my head high as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box. The family photo. The small jade plant I kept alive for 3 years. The handwritten thank you note from Michael Zhang after I'd helped his company navigate a crucial merger. What Harrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day his appointment was announced. I'd seen it in his eyes during our first meeting, the way he'd looked past me while I briefed him on our major accounts. The way he'd interrupted me to ask if his coffee could be reheated. My phone buzzed as I waited for the elevator. A message from Sarah at Rothschild. Weekly strategy call tomorrow at 9 a.m. London time, as usual. Don't be late. I smiled, thinking about Harrison trying to handle that call. Sarah, who refused to speak to anyone she hadn't personally vetted. Sarah, who had made it clear when signing their $30 million contract that I was the reason Rothschild chose Maxwell Industries. Another buzz. Michael Zhang. Dinner still on for next week, flying in from Hong Kong specially. I didn't respond to either message. Instead, I let security escort me through the lobby, past the marble columns and sprawling reception desk where I'd started as a temp secretary 7 years ago. Outside, London's morning rush was in full swing. I took a deep breath of city air, car exhaust, coffee shops, possibility. Need a cab, Ms. Walker? Jim asked. No thanks, I said, hefting my box. I think I'll walk. As I turned toward Bank Station, my phone buzzed again. An email from Maxwell's legal team reminding me about the NDA's confidentiality provisions. I almost laughed. They thought the NDA would protect them, that it would keep me quiet, make me disappear. What they didn't understand was that I didn't need to say anything. The clients would do all the talking for me. At home, in my small but immaculate flat in Greenwich, I set my box of belongings on the kitchen counter and opened my personal laptop. Not the company machine. I'd left that behind, wiped clean of everything except work files. This computer contained something far more valuable, my private database of client interactions, preferences, and relationships. Not confidential company information. I was too careful for that. But the personal details that made business relationships work, the kind of details Harrison would never think to ask about. Like how Sarah from Rothschild was deathly allergic to shellfish, making Harrison's planned dinner at that new seafood restaurant a potential disaster. Or how Michael Zhang always scheduled important meetings for Tuesday because it was his late mother's favorite day. Or how the CEO of their third largest client, Frederick Larsen, refused to do video calls before 11 a.m. his time because he had a standing breakfast date with his teenage daughter. These weren't trade secrets. They were human connections, the kind that couldn't be documented in any CRM system or passed along in any handover notes. My phone buzzed again. A message from Diana Chen, my former mentor who'd left Maxwell 2 years ago to start her own consulting firm. Heard what happened. Let me know when you're ready to talk about Plan B. Plan B. We discussed it months ago, when Harrison's appointment was first announced. I dismissed it then, still believing that competence and results would matter more than politics and prejudice. I should have known better. Opening my email, I began drafting a careful message to Sarah at Rothschild. Nothing about being fired. Harrison could handle that announcement himself. Just a brief note about my personal email address and phone number, in case you need to reach me. I did the same for Michael Zhang, Frederick Larsen, and the other key clients I cultivated over the years. No complaints, no accusations, just information they might find useful. Then I settled in to wait. The next morning would bring Harrison's first real test. The weekly strategy call with Rothschild Global. The one where Sarah Adenuga expected detailed updates on 6 different initiatives. The one that required intimate knowledge of their operations, their goals, their concerns. The one that Harrison didn't even know existed. As I made dinner, pasta with the pesto Sarah had taught me to make, I thought about Harrison sitting in my old office, probably already planning how to restructure the client relationships I built, how to make them fit his idea of how business should work. My phone buzzed one last time. A calendar invite from Diana. Breakfast tomorrow, after the fireworks. I accepted with a smile, then set my phone aside and enjoyed my dinner in peace. Tomorrow would be interesting enough without worrying about it tonight. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's simply stepping aside and letting reality do the work for you. And reality was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I was already settled at Diana's favorite cafe in Covent Garden when my phone lit up at exactly 9:01 a.m. Right on schedule. Good morning, Ms. Walker. Sarah Adenuga's crisp Nigerian-British accent was unmistakable. I've just had the most fascinating interaction with your replacement. I stirred my coffee slowly. Oh? Indeed, he seemed quite surprised when I asked about the Thomson merger implications. Even more surprised when I mentioned the regulatory compliance updates we discussed last week. But do you know what truly shocked him? What's that? When I informed him that our contract explicitly requires all strategic communications to be handled by our designated account manager, the one listed by name in Section 7.3, I could picture Harrison's face, the slow realization dawning as he frantically flipped through contract pages. He's currently scrambling to find the document, Sarah continued, amusement clear in her voice. I've put the call on hold. Been waiting for 6 minutes now. Deanna arrived at our table, raising an eyebrow at my phone conversation. That sounds challenging, I said neutrally. Olivia, Sarah's voice turned serious. What happened? I believe Mr. Harrison is implementing his vision for the company's future, one that doesn't include certain, redundant elements. A sharp intake of breath. He didn't. He did. Yesterday afternoon. That absolute fool. Sarah's tone could have frozen the Thames. Well, he's about to have a very educational morning. I've already emailed their board. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. Michael Jean. Sarah, I should go. Other calls coming in. Of course. Dinner next week. My treat. We have much to discuss. I switched calls just as Diana's coffee arrived. Olivia. Michael's voice was animated. I just tried to reach you at the office. They said you're no longer with the company. Some new director tried to tell me he'd be handling our account personally. He didn't even know about our expansion plans. Yes, Mr. Harrison has taken over global operations. Harrison? Michael snorted. The one who spent our only meeting talking about his Hamptons house and Harvard MBA. Please, I'm canceling next week's dinner and the contract discussion. That's your prerogative, I said carefully, mindful of my NDA. It's more than that. I've got calls into 3 other firms. Ones that understand the value of relationships over resumes. A pause. Any of them you'd recommend? Before I could answer, another call beeped through. Frederick Larson. The next 2 hours were a blur of calls and messages. Every major client I'd cultivated. Every relationship I'd built, reaching out one after another. Not just checking on me, but actively pulling away from Maxwell Industries. Diana sat quietly, occasionally sliding pastries toward me as she watched the drama unfold. At 11:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jim in security. Board members arriving. Emergency meeting called. Harrison looks like he's seen a ghost. I could imagine the scene unfolding in the Maxwell offices. The mounting crisis as client after client either refused to speak with Harrison or explicitly threatened to take their business elsewhere. The dawning realization that I hadn't just managed accounts. I'd built relationships that went far deeper than quarterly reports and profit margins. Time for Plan B. Diana asked as I finally set down my phone. I nodded. Tell me more about your consulting firm. She smiled, pulling out a sleek folder. We've been waiting for you. Corner office, full autonomy, and a chance to build something new. Something better. Won't Maxwell's NDA be a problem? Actually, she slid a document across the table. I had our lawyers review it. The NDA prevents you from sharing confidential company information. It doesn't prevent you from accepting clients who choose to follow you, especially if they make that choice without any solicitation on your part. My phone buzzed again. An email from Maxwell's board secretary. Emergency meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. Your presence is requested. Call details attached. Deanna raised an eyebrow. Going to accept. I thought about Harrison probably pacing in my old office, watching his grand plans crumble. About the board members, finally realizing what they'd allowed to happen. Of course, I said, opening my laptop. It would be rude to refuse. At 2:55 p.m., I logged into the video call from Diana's office. One by one, faces appeared on screen. Board members I'd briefed countless times. Harrison, his tie slightly askew, eyes darting nervously. And in the center square, Charles Maxwell himself, the company's founder, pulled back from semi-retirement for this crisis. Ms. Walker, Charles began without preamble. We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I waited silently. This morning we received formal notifications from 6 major clients. representing over $120 million in annual contracts. They've all indicated their intent to terminate their relationships with Maxwell Industries, citing concerns about account management changes. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Additionally, Charles continued, we've received a rather pointed letter from Rothschild Global's legal team regarding breach of contract, specifically Section 7.3 of their service agreement. The designated account manager clause, I said helpfully. Indeed, Charles's eyes narrowed. A clause that, upon review, appears in various forms in all our major client contracts. Clauses that specifically name you as the required point of contact. Harrison's face had gone from red to pale. Sir, if I had known. Yes, Mr. Harrison. If you had known. If you had bothered to review the contracts. If you had taken 5 minutes to understand the relationships Ms. Walker built instead of assuming her role was, what was the word? Redundant? The silence was deafening. Ms. Walker, Charles turned back to me. We would like to offer you your position back, with a significant increase in both compensation and authority. Full directorship, board seat, whatever you require. I smiled gently. That's very generous, Charles. But I've actually just accepted another position. Name your price, Harrison burst out. Whatever they're offering, we'll double it. It's not about the money, Mr. Harrison. It never was. It was about respect. About understanding that business isn't just titles and MBAs. It's relationships. Trust. The kind of things you can't buy with a summer home in the Hamptons. Charles nodded slowly. Diana Chen's firm? Yes. She's been trying to poach you for 2 years. And now she has. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. I should mention, I've received several calls from clients today. I haven't responded to any of their business inquiries, of course. That would violate my NDA. Harrison made a choking sound. Of course, Charles said dryly, and I suppose once your garden leave ends, I'll be free to respond to any inquiries that may come my way. Purely coincidentally. The board members exchanged glances. They knew, just as I did, what would happen next. The clients wouldn't just leave Maxwell. They would follow me to Diana's firm. Not because I asked them to, but because they wanted to. Is there nothing we can do to change your mind? Charles asked quietly. I thought about Harrison's smirk as he dismissed me, about all the times I've been underestimated, overlooked, assumed to be just a secretary. I'm afraid not. But I wish you all the best, especially you, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure you'll do fine once you learn how to reheat your own coffee. I ended the call before anyone could respond. Diana was waiting outside her office. Well, I believe I'm officially unemployed. For about 30 more seconds. She grinned, holding up a contract, ready to become a partner at Chen Global Consulting. I took the contract, thinking about all the possibilities ahead, about building something new, something that valued substance over status, relationships over resumes. Partner and head of global strategy, I read from the title page. Well, Diana smirked, we couldn't very well call you a secretary, could we? My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Sarah at Rothschild. Just terminated our contract with Maxwell. Such a shame. I don't suppose you'll be taking on new clients soon. I looked at Diana, who nodded encouragingly. Give me 2 weeks, I typed back. I'm about to start something new. Something much better than revenge. Something that would show everyone exactly who they'd underestimated. And Harrison? He was about to learn the hardest lesson in business. Sometimes the person you dismiss as just a secretary is actually the one running the whole show. He just hadn't figured it out in time. 6 months after walking out of Maxwell Industries, I stood in front of Chen Global Consulting's newly expanded London office, watching our logo being installed on the building's facade. In the reflection of the glass doors, I could see Maxwell's building several blocks away. They'd recently laid off 30% of their staff. Admiring the view, Diana appeared beside me, 2 coffee cups in hand. Or just enjoying the irony? I accepted the coffee with a smile. Both, maybe. Did you see the news this morning? About Harrison's resignation. Hard to miss. Though resignation seems generous when you're asked to leave by unanimous board vote. The headline had been diplomatic. Maxwell Industries announces leadership changes amid continued client exodus. The reality was far more brutal. After losing over $200 million in contracts in 6 months, the board had finally had enough. Sarah sent me the internal numbers, I said, sipping my coffee. They're down 68% in global operations revenue. Diana whistled. Turns out relationships matter more than Harvard MBAs. Who knew? We walked into the building together, passing through the bustling reception area. In half a year, Chen Global had grown from a boutique consulting firm to a major player in international business strategy. Our client list read like a who's who of global commerce, with Rothschild Global and Zhang Technologies leading the pack. My new office, earned, not taken, occupied the corner of the 18th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer views of the city I'd helped reshape, one client relationship at a time. But unlike Harrison's sterile domain, my space reflected actual work. Whiteboards covered in strategy notes, a conference table perpetually surrounded by chairs, and most importantly, an open-door policy that made every employee feel welcome. Morning, Olivia. Jessica, my new assistant, appeared with the day's schedule. I'd insisted on hiring her away from Maxwell's reception desk, recognizing the same hunger for growth I'd once had. Thanks, Jess. Still on for your strategy training this afternoon? She beamed. Unlike Maxwell, Chen Global had a clear advancement path for everyone, regardless of their starting position. Jessica was already handling junior client interactions, building her own network of relationships. Wouldn't miss it. Oh, and Michael Zhang sent over the final contract revision. He's added 2 more subsidiaries to our portfolio. I nodded, remembering the dinner where Michael had officially moved his business to Chen Global. He'd insisted on hosting at the same dumpling shop where we'd first discussed his company's international expansion 3 years ago. Your success isn't surprising, he'd said over steaming Jiao Longbao. You understand that business is about people, not just profits. My phone buzzed. A message from Charles Maxwell himself. Got a minute to talk. Diana, reading over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Going to take it? Of course. I settled behind my desk, activated the speakerphone. Charles, how are you? Surviving. He sounded tired. Though I suspect you know exactly how we're doing. I hear things occasionally. Things. He chuckled without humor. Like how our entire Asia-Pacific division followed Zhang Technologies out the door. Or how Rothschild just canceled their last remaining contract. I stayed silent, letting him continue. The board asked me to reach out, one last time. We're prepared to offer you full control of global operations. Carte blanche to rebuild however you see fit. That's very generous, I said carefully. But I'm happy where I am. So I gathered. A pause. We should have seen it, you know. What Harrison couldn't understand. What I couldn't understand until it was too late. And what's that? That the strength of a business isn't in its organizational charts or its fancy titles. It's in its relationships, its people. Another pause. The ones we dismissed as just anything, secretaries, assistants, support staff. I thought about Jessica, already showing the same instincts that had helped me build my client portfolio. About Jim from security, who now headed our facilities team, treating every employee and visitor with the respect that built lasting loyalty. It's an expensive lesson, I said finally. Yes. His voice turned thoughtful. I don't suppose Chen Global would be interested in acquiring what's left of Maxwell's Global Operations division. Now it was my turn to pause. I'll bring it up with Diana, though any deal would require significant restructuring. Of course, he sounded relieved just to have the conversation. We could discuss it over dinner perhaps. That Italian place you always recommended, but I was too busy to try. I'll have Jessica set something up. After we hung up, Diana burst out laughing. Are we really going to buy out Maxwell's division? Maybe, I smiled. At the right price, with the right changes. The rest of the day passed in a blur of client calls, strategy sessions, and mentoring meetings. I made a point of knowing every employee's name, their aspirations, their potential. No one was just anything at Chen Global. At 6 p.m., as I was reviewing the next day's presentations, Sarah from Rothschild stopped by. She'd flown in specially for tomorrow's board meeting, my first as Chen Global's newest managing partner. Quite a view, she said, looking out over London. Better than your old office. Different perspective, I agreed, though I learned a lot from that view too. She turned, studying me thoughtfully. You know, when Harrison first told me you were gone, he said you were just a secretary who'd gotten lucky. That real leadership required a certain pedigree. And now? Now he's updating his LinkedIn profile while you're building an empire. She smiled. Karma has a peculiar sense of humor. Later that evening, after most of the office had cleared out, I found Jessica still at her desk, studying client reports. Learning the patterns? I asked. She looked up, slightly embarrassed. Just trying to understand how you do it. Build these relationships that last. I sat down beside her desk, remembering all the late nights I'd spent doing exactly the same thing. Want to know the secret? I pointed to the client file she was reading. It's not about their business metrics or their market position. It's about remembering that their daughter just started university, that they're training for a marathon, that they prefer Earl Grey to English breakfast tea. Human details, she said thoughtfully. Exactly, because at the end of the day, business isn't about companies. It's about people. And people remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you actually did. My phone buzzed one final time, a news alert. Maxwell Industries stock had dropped another 15% on Harrison's departure announcement. Jessica saw the headline and smiled sympathetically. Do you ever feel bad about what happened to them? I thought about Harrison's dismissive smirk, about all the times I've been overlooked and underestimated, about the lesson that needed to be learned. No, I said honestly. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. Besides, I gestured around at our thriving office. We built something better. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for the board meeting. The agenda included our expansion plans, including the possible Maxwell acquisition. But more importantly, it included our new employee development program, ensuring that no one would ever be dismissed as just anything again. As I set up my presentation, I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. It showed my first day as a temp secretary at Maxwell Industries, young and uncertain but determined. I kept it as a reminder not of where I'd started, but of how far I'd come. My phone lit up with a message from Diana, ready to show them what just a secretary can really do. I smiled, straightening my jacket and gathering my materials. The boardroom would be full of industry leaders, major clients, and institutional investors. All of them there to hear my vision for the future. A future where titles didn't define potential, where relationships mattered more than resumes, where success was measured not by who you could dismiss, but by who you could lift up. More than ready, I typed back. Because the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's building something so right that their mistakes become irrelevant. And that's exactly what we did. The champagne was still fizzing in our glasses when Marcus came to deliver the knife to my back. Emily, he said, his voice carrying that smooth, practiced tone he usually reserved for investor pitches, we need to talk about the future of quantum dynamics. I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for weeks. The private meetings I wasn't invited to, the sudden changes in development priorities, the way our new investors seemed to look through me during presentations. But I've been too focused on perfecting our quantum encryption algorithm. The same algorithm I'd spent 3 years developing in my garage before Marcus ever entered the picture. We stood in the empty conference room of our newly leased office space in downtown San Francisco, the city lights twinkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows that still bore the realtor's fingerprints. The $5 million series of funding had just cleared our account that morning. Everything I'd dreamed of was finally happening. Or so I thought. The investors have concerns, Marcus continued, swirling his champagne without drinking it. About leadership structure. About market positioning. He paused, studying my face. About you. I set my glass down carefully, the subtle tremor in my hand betraying the sudden surge of adrenaline. What kind of concerns? They feel, and I agree, that we need someone more. He gestured vaguely with his free hand. Polished. Someone with real business experience. Someone who can talk to Wall Street. I built this company, I said quietly. I developed the core technology. I brought in our first clients. Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. And we're grateful for that. Really. But this isn't about code anymore, Emily. This is about scaling, about market presence, about leadership. I knew what was coming next. I'd seen it happen to other female founders. Brilliant women pushed aside once their companies started gaining traction. Their technical expertise suddenly deemed less valuable than an MBA and a golf club membership. The board has voted, Marcus said, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed before. We're restructuring the leadership team. You'll be transitioned to a technical advisory role with a generous compensation package, of course. Advisory role? I almost laughed. In my own company? That's the thing, he said, his smile widening slightly. It's not really your company anymore. The new funding agreement diluted your shares significantly. You're a minority stakeholder now. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I grabbed the edge of the conference table to steady myself. You knew about this. You planned it. Business is business, Emily. You're brilliant with code, truly. But we need someone who understands how to build a real company. Someone like me. I picked up the folder without opening it. And if I refuse? Then you'll be terminated for cause, lose your shares entirely, and face potential legal action for interfering with company operations. He shrugged. The paperwork can go either way. Your choice. I should have screamed. Should have thrown the champagne in his face. Should have threatened legal action of my own. Instead, I smiled. Thank you for being direct, I said calmly, tucking the folder under my arm. I'll review these with my lawyer. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown by my composure. That's good. Take the weekend to think it over. But we'll need an answer by Monday. The press release is already drafted. I nodded once and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, I turned back. One question, Marcus. Did you ever actually read my patent applications? The original ones from before we partnered. He waved dismissively. The company owns all relevant IP. It was in the partnership agreement. Right, I said softly. Of course. Good night, Marcus. The elevator ride to the lobby felt surreal. 3 years of work, of sacrifice, of believing I could change the world with quantum encryption that actually worked at scale. All of it hanging by a thread because I hadn't seen the predator hiding behind the partner. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He hadn't just underestimated me. He'd fundamentally misunderstood what I'd built. Outside, the San Francisco night was alive with possibility. I pulled out my phone, not my company iPhone, but my personal device, and dialed a number I'd hoped I'd never need. Deanne? It's Emily. Remember that conversation we had about contingency plans? I think it's time. Diane Wong had been my patent attorney since before quantum dynamics existed. More importantly, she'd been the one who insisted on some very specific language in my original patent filings. Are you at the office? She asked, all business. Just leaving. They did it exactly like you predicted. Come over. Now, bring everything you have. And Emily, don't sign anything. An hour later, I sat in Diane's home office, surrounded by papers and digital files chronicling the evolution of quantum dynamics. 3 years of work spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. The good news, Diane said, examining my partnership agreement with Marcus, is that they've been sloppy. Very sloppy. The IP assignment clause they're relying on only covers developments made after the partnership was formed. I leaned forward. And the original patents? She smiled, pulling up a document on her tablet. Were filed in your name personally 9 months before quantum dynamics existed. They cover the core architecture, the base algorithms, and most importantly, the quantum key distribution protocol that makes everything else work. So the company owns the wrapper, the user interface, the marketing materials. But the heart of the technology, that's still yours. Completely yours. I sat back, letting this sink in. Marcus doesn't know. Oh, it's better than that, Diane said, pulling up another document. Look at the IPO filing they submitted last week. Page 47, Section C. I scanned the dense text, then stopped, my heart racing. They're claiming full ownership of the core technology. They've included my patents in their IP portfolio. Exactly. Diane's smile turned predatory. They're not just being aggressive. They're making materially false statements in an IPO filing. That's securities fraud. The implications started cascading through my mind. The IPO was scheduled for Monday morning. The company, my company, was expected to debut at a $400 million valuation, largely based on the strength of the quantum encryption technology. Technology I still owned. What are my options? Diane leaned back, studying me carefully. Legally? We could file an emergency injunction, halt the IPO, and drag them into a protracted court battle. You'd probably win eventually, but it would take years and millions in legal fees. Or we let them walk right into their own trap. Let them launch the IPO claiming ownership of technology they don't actually control. Then we drop the truth at exactly the right moment. I thought about Marcus's smirk, his casual dismissal of everything I'd built. What do you need from me? Everything. Every email, every development log, every conversation about the patents. And most importantly, did you keep your original research notes? The ones from before Marcus? I nodded. Everything's in my private GitHub repository. Timestamped, cryptographically signed. Perfect. She started typing rapidly. Go home. Get some rest. Don't respond to any calls or messages from them. And Emily? When this is over, you won't just have your company back. You'll own everything. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I provided Diane with everything she needed while ignoring increasingly urgent messages from Marcus and the board. They wanted an answer about the transition. They needed me to sign the papers. The press release was ready to go. I responded only once, late Sunday night. I'll have my decision first thing Monday morning. Meanwhile, Diane had been busy. She'd assembled a team of securities lawyers, technical experts, and PR specialists. More importantly, she'd reached out to someone who would prove crucial to our plan. Sandra Chen, the SEC's lead investigator for tech industry compliance. The filing is scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Eastern, Diane explained during our final prep call Sunday evening. Trading will begin at 10. We move at 10:01. And you're sure this will work? Emily, they're about to commit securities fraud on a massive scale. The only question is whether you want to stop them before or after they do irreparable damage to themselves. I thought about every time Marcus had talked over me in meetings, every investor who'd addressed their questions to him instead of me. Every subtle and not so subtle suggestion that I should focus on the technology and leave the real business to him. After, I said firmly, definitely after. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. I watched the sunrise from my apartment's small balcony, sipping coffee and monitoring financial news sites. The IPO was already making headlines. Quantum Dynamics set to revolutionize cybersecurity market. The articles all quoted Marcus extensively, praising his visionary leadership and innovative approach to quantum encryption. Not one mentioned my name. At 9:15 a.m., I received a final text from him. Last chance to do this the easy way. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the secure server Diane had set up. Everything was ready: the patent documentation, the development histories, the proof that the company's entire IPO was built on a foundation of sand. At 9:30 a.m. exactly, Quantum Dynamics stock appeared on the NASDAQ. The opening price was set at $45 per share. At 9:45 a.m., trading in the pre-market began. The price jumped to $60. At 9:55 a.m., Marcus appeared on CNBC, speaking confidently about the company's proprietary technology and comprehensive IP portfolio. At 10 o'clock a.m., regular trading began. The stock opened at $72 and immediately began to climb. At 10:01 a.m., I pressed enter. The truth was about to change everything. At precisely 10:01 a.m., our coordinated strike began. First, the SEC received our comprehensive evidence package detailing the fraudulent IP claims in Quantum Dynamics' IPO filing. Simultaneously, every major financial news outlet received a press release from my legal team revealing the true ownership of the core patents. I watched the chaos unfold on 6 different screens in Diane's office. 10:02 a.m. The first alert hit Bloomberg Terminal. The word GENT. Questions arise over Quantum Dynamics patent rights. 10:03 a.m. The stock, which had reached $78, suddenly froze. 10:04 a.m. Marcus still live on CNBC, visibly flinch as the host received breaking news through his earpiece. Mr. Kane, we're getting reports that your company may not own the core technology behind your encryption system. Care to comment? The camera caught Marcus's face in perfect clarity as the blood drained from it. We have full ownership of all relevant intellectual property. According to documents we're receiving, the host continued, glancing at his tablet, the fundamental patents for your quantum encryption technology are personally owned by your co-founder, Emily Sullivan. The patents predate Quantum Dynamics' existence by nearly a year. Marcus's smile became rigid. There must be some mistake. Our legal team has thoroughly vetted. He was cut off by a new alert flashing across the bottom of the screen. Nasdaq HLT's T rating of QEANTUM Dynamaxis, Key DYN, pending investigation. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. What are you doing? I didn't respond. Instead, I watched as Diane's carefully orchestrated plan continued to unfold. At 10:15 a.m., Sandra Chen from the SEC made a public statement. We are investigating potentially serious discrepancies in Quantum Dynamics' IPO filing regarding their intellectual property claims. Trading will remain halted pending a full review. The financial media was in a frenzy. Headlines updated by the minute. Quantum Dynamics IPO in chaos. Tech startups opening day derailed by patent dispute. Co-founder claims ownership of core technology. At 10:30 a.m., our second wave hit. Diane released my complete documentation package to selected journalists. Every email, every development log, every piece of evidence showing that I had developed the technology independently before Marcus ever entered the picture. More importantly, we released proof that Marcus and the board had been explicitly informed of the patent situation months ago, but had chosen to ignore it. Emily, Diane said, looking up from her phone, the SEC wants to meet. Now, and they want Marcus there too. I straightened my blazer, navy blue, impeccably tailored, chosen specifically for this moment. Where? Their San Francisco office. 20 minutes. The ride downtown was surreal. Every financial news app on my phone was exploding with updates. Quantum Dynamics stock remained frozen at $78, but trading in related companies was going wild as the market tried to process the implications. Marcus was already at the SEC office when we arrived, along with the company's legal team. He started to speak when he saw me, but his company counsel, grabbed his arm and shook his head sharply. Sandra Chen met us in a large conference room with a view of the bay. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Mr. King, your company's IPO filing claims ownership of patents numbered. She read off a series of numbers I knew by heart. Is that correct? Marcus looked at his lawyers, who nodded slightly. Yes, that's correct. Ms. Sullivan. Sandra turned to me. You claim these patents are registered to you personally, is that right? Yes, I said clearly. I filed them 9 months before Quantum Dynamics existed, before I ever met Mr. Kane. That's impossible, Marcus interrupted. The partnership agreement clearly states. I have the original patent documents right here. Diane cut in smoothly, sliding papers across the table. Along with Emily's complete development history, including GitHub commits dating back 4 years. Would you like to see them? The next hour was excruciating for Marcus and his team as they realized just how thoroughly they'd miscalculated. The partnership agreement they'd relied on only covered developments made after the company's formation. My original patents, the ones that made everything else possible, remained firmly in my control. This is a serious matter, Sandra said finally. We're looking at potentially criminal securities fraud. The IPO filing materially misrepresented the company's intellectual property assets. Marcus's lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. Settlement? I laughed softly. You tried to steal my life's work. You tried to erase me from my own company. And now you want to settle. Emily, be reasonable, Marcus said, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. The company needs these patents. We can figure out fair compensation. Fair? I stood up slowly. Was it fair when you diluted my shares without notice? When you tried to force me out of the company I built? When you took my technology and claimed it as your own? The room fell silent. Here's what's going to happen. I continued, pulling out a document of my own. I've prepared a new licensing agreement for the patents. The terms are simple. I regain majority control of Quantum Dynamics. The board resigns. You, Marcus, sell your shares at their original purchase price and step down. In return, I don't press charges for patent infringement or fraud. That's extortion, he sputtered. No, Sandra interjected. Given the evidence of intentional misrepresentation in the IPO filing, Ms. Sullivan is being quite generous. The alternative would likely involve criminal charges. Marcus's lawyers huddled in whispered consultation while we waited. I could see the exact moment they realized they had no choice. The entire IPO was built on technology the company didn't actually own. Without my patents, quantum dynamics was worthless. How long do we have to decide? One of the lawyers asked. The market opens again tomorrow, I said simply. You have until then to accept my terms. After that, I'll license the technology to your competitors instead. As we left the SEC office, reporters had already gathered outside. Someone had leaked news of the emergency meeting. Marcus slipped out a back entrance, but I walked straight through the front door. Miss Sullivan, is it true you own Quantum Dynamics core technology? Will the IPO be canceled? Did the company try to steal your patents? I stopped and faced the cameras, channeling every ounce of confidence I hidden during months of preparation for this moment. I created the quantum encryption technology that makes quantum dynamics possible. I built it before the company existed, before Mr. Kane became involved. Today is about correcting the record and ensuring that truth prevails over deception. I'll have more to say tomorrow. Back at Diane's office, messages were pouring in. Other directors trying to save themselves. Investors demanding explanations. Employees asking if they still had jobs. What now? Diane asked, watching me scroll through the chaos on my phone. I smiled, thinking about all the nights I'd spent in my garage, coding and dreaming and believing that intelligence and hard work would be enough. I'd been naive then, but I wasn't naive anymore. Now, I said, we rebuild. But first, we make sure this never happens to another founder. The next few hours would determine not just my future, but the future of the company I created. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it from me. As evening fell over San Francisco, I received one final message from Marcus. You've destroyed everything. I typed back a single line. No, I've just taken back what was mine. See you tomorrow. The real work was about to begin. The morning after the IPO chaos dawned with a different kind of tension. I arrived at Quantum Dynamics offices at 7 a.m., escorted by 2 members of the corporate security team who had quietly reached out the night before to offer their support. The lobby was already buzzing with nervous employees, all trying to understand what yesterday's events meant for their future. I hadn't been in the building since Marcus forced me out, but I walked through those doors like I owned them, because now I did. At 3 a.m., after 14 hours of negotiations, Marcus and the board had capitulated to my terms. They had no choice. The company's valuation was built entirely on my patents, and I had all the leverage. Emily, Jessica from engineering, spotted me first. She rushed over, others following in her wake. Is it true? Are you taking back control? I smiled, addressing not just her but the growing crowd of employees gathering in the lobby. Yes, and we have a lot of work to do. The elevator ride to the executive floor was filled with supportive whispers and quiet congratulations. These people, the real heart of quantum dynamics, had watched me build this company from nothing. They'd seen me pushed aside, and now they were witnessing my return. Marcus's office, my office now, was empty when I arrived. He cleared out overnight, leaving behind only a post-it note with a single word, congratulations. The sarcasm was obvious, but I didn't care. I had bigger concerns. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and streaming via video from our other offices. Yesterday, I began you all learned some disturbing truths about this company's leadership, about attempts to take credit for and control of technology that I developed. Today, I want to talk about the future. The room was silent, everyone hanging on every word. First, your jobs are secure. In fact, we're expanding. The technical vision that brought you all here hasn't changed. It's just back in the hands of its original creator. Relief swept through the crowd. Then came the harder part. Second, we're rebuilding our leadership team from the ground up. Based on merit, not connections. Based on innovation, not intimidation. I'll be interviewing every department head personally this week. And yes, internal candidates will be given priority. That brought smiles to several faces, particularly among the veteran employees who'd been passed over for promotion under Marcus's regime. Finally, we're going to do something unprecedented. Every employee who stayed with us through this transition will receive additional equity in the company, because quantum dynamics isn't just about quantum encryption anymore. It's about proving that the right way can also be the successful way. The applause was spontaneous and genuine. As it died down, I noticed Diana from legal signaling urgently from the doorway. The SEC's statement was about to drop. I turned on CNBC just in time to catch it live. The Securities and Exchange Commission has reached a settlement with former executives of Quantum Dynamics regarding disclosures in their IPO filing. The company will be permitted to resume trading under new leadership, subject to amended filings and certain restrictions. My phone immediately exploded with messages. Investors wanting meetings, reporters seeking comments, competitors testing waters. But the most interesting message came from Sandra Chen at the SEC. Clean house thoroughly. You have a one-time chance to set this right. Don't waste it. I spent the next week rebuilding my company from the inside out. Every decision Marcus had made was reviewed. Every agreement was reassessed. Every employee was given a chance to voice their concerns and their ideas. Jessica, who had been quietly maintaining the core codebase even after my departure, was promoted to Chief Technology Officer. Her first act was to reorganize the development team based on expertise rather than politics. Mark from sales, who had apparently been maintaining a secret list of clients who refused to work with Marcus, was made VP of Client Relations. Within days, he had brought back 3 major accounts we lost. But the real victory came from an unexpected source. Remember Sandra Chen from the SEC? She didn't just help expose the fraud, she introduced me to Catherine Hayes, a veteran tech CEO who had faced similar attempted coups in her own career. Catherine didn't want a job or a board seat. What she wanted was to help create something new. The Founders Defense Fund, a legal and financial resource for entrepreneurs facing illegal takeover attempts. I became its first sponsor and success story. 2 months after the failed IPO, we were ready to try again. This time, everything was done right. The patents were properly licensed to the company. The ownership structure was clear and fair. The technical documentation was impeccable. The night before our second IPO attempt, I received an unexpected email from Marcus. You'll never pull this off. The market remembers. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I forwarded it to our new PR team with a note. Add this to the resilience narrative. The next morning, Quantum Dynamics stock opened at $82 per share, higher than our first attempt, and kept climbing. By closing bell, we had reached $110, making us the best performing tech IPO of the year. But I wasn't in New York to ring any bells or celebrate with bankers. Instead, I was in our San Francisco office, coding alongside my team, just like I had been doing since the beginning. You could have taken the day off, Jessica said, bringing me a coffee. Enjoyed the spotlight a little. I shook my head, not looking away from my screen. The spotlight isn't what matters. The work is what matters. The people are what matters. 6 months after our successful IPO, I stood on stage at the Women in Tech Summit, delivering the keynote address. The room was packed with founders, engineers, and investors, including more than a few who had initially backed Marcus over me. They say success is the best revenge, I told the crowd. But I disagree. Success isn't about revenge. It's about vindication. It's about proving that you can build something meaningful without compromising your principles, without becoming the very thing you set out to change. In the front row, I spotted Catherine Hayes sitting with 3 young founders, women who had already received support from the Founders Defense Fund. They were taking notes, phones recording, eyes bright with possibility. The tech industry has a long history of stolen ideas, betrayed trust, and corruption masquerading as disruption. I continued. But that's not our future. Our future is about creation, not theft. About collaboration, not domination. About building things that matter with people who matter. The applause was thunderous, but the real victory came later, during the networking session. A young engineer approached me, clutching a notebook filled with quantum computing calculations. I have an idea, she said nervously, but everyone says I need a business person to make it real. That I should focus on the tech and let someone else handle the company. I smiled, remembering my own journey. Let me tell you about patents, I said, pulling up a chair, and about how to protect what you build. 1 year to the day after Marcus tried to push me out, Quantum Dynamics was valued at $2.8 billion. Our quantum encryption technology had become the industry standard, and our corporate culture was being studied at business schools as a model of ethical leadership. Marcus? He tried to start another company, but it turned out investors had long memories. Last I heard, he was consulting for struggling startups, telling war stories about the company he almost stole. As for me, I still code every day, still work alongside my team, still remember what it felt like to build something from nothing, to almost lose it, and to take it back. But now, when young founders ask me for advice, I don't just tell them to believe in themselves. I tell them to be prepared, to document everything, to understand that sometimes the biggest threat isn't failure, it's success, and what it makes other people willing to do. Building something revolutionary is only half the battle, I tell them. Protecting it is the other half. Late one evening, as I was leaving the office, I passed the wall where we display our patents. The original ones, my personal ones, that started everything. A young intern was studying them intently. Quite a story behind those, I said. She turned, eyes bright with curiosity. I know, they taught it in my business ethics class. About how you didn't just win, you changed things. I smiled, thinking about the Founders Defense Fund, about the dozens of entrepreneurs we'd already helped, about the countless others who would never face what I faced because the industry had finally started to change. You know what the real secret is? I told her. It's not about winning or losing. It's about building something that matters, protecting it with everything you have, and then using that strength to help others build too. She nodded thoughtfully, then asked the question I'd been expecting. Weren't you afraid when you pressed that button on IPO day? No, I said honestly, because by then I knew something Marcus never understood. True power isn't about control or dominance. It's about creation, about protection, about doing things the right way even when the wrong way seems easier. I looked out at the San Francisco skyline, at the city that had seen my greatest defeat and my greatest triumph. And sometimes I added softly, it's about showing the world that the people they try to erase are exactly the ones they should have feared all along. The intern smiled, understanding perfectly, because that's what my story had become, not just a tale of personal vindication, but a blueprint for change. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight back. It's build something better,